Good evening. A warm welcome to those attending and also to our viewers watching live on the Council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon, London. This is a meeting of the Children, Families and Education Select Committee. My name is Councillor Heena Makwana and I'm the chair of this meeting. Details of the business to be considered today is shown in the agenda, copies of which are available in the room and also accessible on YouTube underneath the broadcast. Please note that due to the attendance of young people, items 1 to 5 have not been broadcast on YouTube. Housekeeping, we are not expecting a fire drill, so if the fire alarm does go off, please follow officers to the fire exits and out of the building to the designated meeting points. For those in the room, please switch any mobile devices to silent before the meeting starts, and when you are invited to speak, please ensure you turn your microphones on so that you can be heard in the recording. Please note that this is a meeting held in public, not a public meeting. Therefore, there are no speaking rights available to members of the public. For those watching via YouTube, if you are so minded, you can complete one of our resident feedback forms. These can be found in the information section underneath the YouTube video. These forms are intended to help us improve the way that we run our meetings. Thank you. As we've already made introductions, we move straight to agenda item 6, so I'm going to hand over to you, Claire. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So thank you for inviting me back to provide an update on our delivery of the Family Hub strategy and also our position for our early years nurseries. So I'll give a brief overview of where we've got to and then happy to take any questions. In delivering the Family Hub strategy, which was obviously presented and ratified by Cabinet last September, we've continued to make strides in what we're delivering. We opened our second hub in Hayes in January this year, and so we now have 2 hubs in the Borough, one here in Uxbridge and one in Hayes, delivering services across the 0 to 19 age group, up to 25 for children and young people with SEND. We've also had some highlights across the year. So earlier in February, we were visited by Dame Andrea Leadsom, who spearheaded the Early Years Healthy Development Review. And so that was really positive for us to be able to showcase our Start for Life offer, which supports parents and parents-to-be from pre-birth up to the age of 2. So focuses on the work that we're doing in the very early years to support children's development. In line with that, we've been able to publish our Start for Life offer on the Council website as per the DfE guidance in relation to delivering the services for children and young people across that particular age group. And the links are in the publication if that helps people to be able to find their way to the information. We've also worked with our colleagues in communications and we've been able to develop a strategy to advertise what we're doing and to broadcast to families and children and young people. So we now have a Family Hub graphic which will appears on all of our literature and on our web pages. We also have a short film that showcases the work that we're delivering and showcases the work from very early on through to some of our young people starring to tell us how they're accessing and receiving the services. And we'll continue to develop that as time goes on. As you've already heard, we're working closely across the partnership, so we've been very much part of delivering the 0 to 19 service directory. We are on track to publish that in January, and so we're confident that that will be available for residents, so parents, but also children and young people as well, to access and understand services available locally to them in their community. Additionally, we've also been working on the Stronger Families Partnership work, and so we're absolutely instrumental in delivering the Partnership Day at Hayes Men's Working Club. It was attended by 130 delegates from both statutory and voluntary community sectors, and the partnership was very much appreciative of having the opportunity to network, so actually building those connections, helping people to understand what their services and other services delivered and supported, and really kind of looking at how we can move ahead. Specifically in relation to family hubs, we're now looking at developing an outcomes framework so that we can much more closely track and monitor what we're doing. That's again in line with some of the thought process around the DfE recommendations. So we're kind of looking at that and mapping our services and looking at how we can measure what we're doing. But I have included within the pack some headline data around how we're delivering services, and particularly across the 0 to 5 age range. And part of our work is to look at how we incorporate data from services across the 5 to 19 age range, so that we're able to build a much broader picture of who we're working with and how we're working together and where we need to target our resources next. So that's Family Hub. Shall I pause there for questions and then talk about the nurseries, or do you want me to keep going? That's fine. So in relation to the Council's early years nurseries, As you'll be aware, at Cabinet the decision was taken that we would look to the market to see if we could source an alternative provider to maintain childcare on those sites, but to not deliver the services directly as a council. So it's been a challenge to work through some of that process, but we have had surveys of the sites and looking at the estate. We've been looking at the value of the business, and we then worked with a specialist agent to market the nurseries and receive offers. So we had a period of visits across the summer from interested parties. Since then, we've received back offers for taking the business forward from 3 distinct providers, and we're currently in negotiations with one preferred provider to hopefully get to the point where we'll be able to make a recommendation at Cabinet in December.
Thank you so much, and thank you for providing that report. It's very clear that there's lots of good work going on behind the scenes. Thank you. Questions? Councillor Hagar.
Yes, thank you very much. It sounds like the communication is really good. And one of the things I was actually going to pick up on was page 34 and page 35 on how we can help you really reaching families who have yet to access the service. I think it's always new families, isn't it? And you've got that as your primary focus. So my first question was, how can we help you with that? Is there anything extra we can do? Here in the committee or even as councillors, obviously sharing the information I know is important, but just wondered whether there was anything else. And just leading on to that, it was really good to see on page 35 about parents seeking support with other parents. I think that's a really good opportunity, again, isn't it, when parents help with other parents and they come together because they have generally the same issues. And how can we support and promote that?
Thank you. Yeah, certainly. So in terms of promotion, we're very happy to engage and participate in any community events that are happening. So if you are running community events or you're aware of them that you would like us to participate in, the outreach team would be very happy to do that. Again, we have flyers that are available, so if anyone wants some flyers, I can certainly make those available to you, and you can put them in strategic places around the borough that maybe we haven't yet got to. They would signpost people to our website to find out more information, so very happy to make any of that literature available to people. And again, we very much know that the people we have yet to reach, it's about word of mouth. So again, we are working with faith community leaders and others to try and work out where we need to best be. We're doing some work in the Heathrow hotels, we're doing some work at William Byrd down in the Heathrow villages, but there are always more opportunities. So if people have ideas of places or spaces that you would like to see us be and deliver services and engage with residents, please either contact myself or my service manager Laura Laie, who's very happy to receive those suggestions.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Batt.
Thank you, Chair. I echo those sentiments from my colleague. I think it's great to see the progress being made within the Family Hub. My question's around the paragraph 33B of end of page 36. I'm just interested to see how many, from the statistics and data we've got, how many were repeat attendances out of the individual attendances, and also just generally your opinion on the data we've got, the performance data, whether it met your expectations or your objectives, and also where we seeing the referrals coming from.
Thank you. So in terms of attendances, we count families rather than unique individuals. So we would count a family attending a session. So that might be a parent and 2, 3, 4 children, or it might be 2 parents coming to an antenatal appointment and no child as yet. So we look at counting families. So we've got multiple people that count as one attendance, just to clarify that point if it's not distinct. In terms of repeat attendances, I don't have that data to hand, but I could look to provide that for you. That's not a problem. I think on a practical basis, we might have repeat attendances for midwifery, antenatal and postnatal appointments, for example, if someone's receiving their care in the community at one of the centres. Similarly, we have families that routinely and regularly come to a stay and play session, or we might run a targeted programme such as Language for Life, and that's a 6-week session. So consequently, we'd expect families to repeatedly attend for those 6 weeks to complete the course. So it depends as to whether it's a universal or a targeted service about the volume of repeats in that respect.
Councillor Sweeting.
As you described in your introduction, the role of the family hubs is to serve the needs of young children up to 19 and up to 25%. It's also used, as page 35, para 19 says, as for youth services to deliver. And I've had various comments that have come back on the youngsters of those teenage years, that because they seem to be, the hubs seem to be more sort of highlighting younger children. I mean, posters up, you know, providing details of all sorts of things happening for young children. They don't feel comfortable as much as when they went into youth centres. So have you found that with those hubs being used for the youth offer? Because certainly I've had 3 or 4 of my residents that said that the youngsters have gone there and they've not gone wanting to go back.
I acknowledge it's a challenge providing an all-age space. I think our example of the hub downstairs is that we've got it zoned. So we have space for very young children, space for older children, and then we've also definitely got space for our older young people. And their artwork is very broadly displayed on the wall, proudly celebrating their contribution to the hub. So certainly we aim to constantly review what we offer and how we offer it, and to make the spaces as multi-purpose as possible. I think the challenge if we didn't offer all-age hubs is that we end up with buildings that are only used for a proportion of the day, and so consequently, you know, the idea behind an all-age space is that we maximise the council's assets, and actually we have spaces and places where we need them. But I do recognise it's a challenge. I haven't had that direct feedback, but I respect that, and I'm happy to talk to colleagues in youth services to understand if there are barriers to young people using the spaces that we have on offer. Currently we only have 2 hubs, and certainly the hub in Hayes is very different in its set out to the one downstairs, and is very much multi-purpose. And so I guess, yes, whilst there'll be posters and information about breastfeeding and tooth decay, there will also be posters around you know, substance misuse and abuse, you know, for other people to access too. So I guess a bit like a doctor's waiting room, where you've got information about immunisations for your baby, but you've also got information for older people as well. So it's not perfect, I acknowledge that, but we're constantly learning and evolving how we provide and use the spaces, and really happy to have any direct feedback if that would help.
I also am concerned about reaching everybody, and I'll come back to the similar theme of reaching families and young people in certain areas of the borough. I mean, this is highlighted, is it not, on page 34, paragraph 15. And this does concern me because certainly Heathrow Villages, young families, it's quite a trek to any venue. And I know that you have, you know, stretched yourself, you've been looking, we've all been looking. But is there any way forward on this? I know that we're waiting for the Jubilee the Jubilee Leisure Centre to be opened, but we still have a way to go.
Yes, I acknowledge that. We do have Cherry Lane Children's Centre, which is very, very much down in that part of the borough, and also Pinkwell Children's Centre. So those are the nearest council assets that we have that physically border that space. We have worked comprehensively with the Residents Association in the Heathrow Villages to hear from them about their suggestions of places and spaces we could go. As I say, we are delivering some sessions directly located with the hotels, and we're also, as I say, in William Byrd Primary School in that area as well. So we're kind of looking to reach people as best we can, but again, we're conscious that we need to offer services in the right way, and part of our first challenge is actually to hear from those residents about what they would want and how we should engage with them, rather than presume that what we're offering meets their needs. So I think that's our first challenge, is actually to be in those communities as we are doing outreach events, in order to hear from them directly as to how we can best support them.
Thank you. Ms Little.
Thank you. I remember when we were looking at this at the early stages, we were very favourably impressed with the enthusiasm of the staff and the ideas behind it. How do you think it's worked out in practice? Has it lived up to expectations, and what are the challenges?
Thank you. I believe it's lived up to expectations. I think the provision that we've managed to deliver to date has been very successful. I think particularly our Start for Life offer is working well, and the support we're providing to families with children in their very earliest years, with the ambition that we are looking to provide early intervention to support to mitigate need and challenge further down the line, is having definitely a level of impact. I think also the partnership working has been really effective. So actually the fact that we have hubs that are thriving with services being delivered not necessarily by us as the council, but by community partners, by health partners, by commissioned partners, I think is really important, so that actually across the piece families don't think that the council is the only place they can go for support, but actually they can gain support from local services where they are, but also, as Councillor Hagar alluded to, from each other. And actually one of the most powerful ways of a parent receiving support is by another parent guiding and directing them to engage with that. So I think that's definitely been part of the success that we've had to date. Are we there yet? Absolutely not. We have a strategy that says we would deliver 6 hubs. I've got 2 up and running. I've got 1 in production and work ongoing in the background to look to deliver the further 3. But, you know, I certainly think we've made good headway, and certainly the work that we're now doing much more effectively across the partnership with youth services, with targeted youth services as an example, to join things together for children and families' benefit has been successful.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gill.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the officer for the in-depth report, and it's pleasing to see progress on the early years nurseries. That's very good to see. My question's similar to Councillor Batts. It's to do with the sort of metrics of success. Do we have specific metrics that we use to measure and evaluate if we've been successful in a way?
So the work I alluded to earlier, which is about developing an outcomes framework, is some of the work that we're trying to do to do just that. There is no national framework for measuring success at this point in time in relation to family hubs. So the success that we have is looking at our attendance data, our registrations, and also the success of achievement of families delivering and attending targeted courses. So actually in terms of increased confidence in parenting, for example, children's increased attention and listening through a Language for Life course, etc. Those are the metrics that we're currently using. But we are working with colleagues in health and also as part of the London Region Network to look at the potential for an outcomes framework that would be shared more widely, so that actually we would have a better understanding of how we might be benchmarking against other boroughs, for example. But that's certainly in its infancy, and there's nothing formal as yet from the DFE that we would need to adhere to, that we could measure ourselves against others to date.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. We will. Oh, you've got a question, Councillor Sweeting.
I was just wondering through you, Chair, do we need to comment on the early years nurseries because this report is going to Cabinet on the 12th of December?
We will take it offline. I'll give it some consideration with Ryan. I'll speak to you and Ryan about this offline.
Okay, because I think that if possible, it would be good to be able to
okay, that's been noted. Thank you. Right, we'll bring that agenda item to a close. Thank you very much, Claire. Agenda item 7 is also you. So are you all right to keep going? This is a proposal to lower the age range for 3 community schools. So when you're ready, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this report outlines the proposal for lowering the age range at 3 community schools to enable them to provide funded places for 2-year-old children. The early years childcare entitlements for children increased from April this year. So from April 2024, we've been able to provide funding for working families to access childcare for 15 hours a week. And then that entitlement then increased from September this year for children aged 9 to 23 months. And that entitlement is set to increase further from September 2025 from those 15 hours to up to 30 hours. So as a local authority, we have a statutory responsibility to ensure, as far as reasonable, sufficiency of childcare places across the borough for working parents and parents training or studying to enter employment. So in order to do that, we've been looking at our sufficiency and also working under the DFE guidelines to look at how and where we can develop childcare provision. And for the market, we are very conscious that there is less sessional care available, given the way in which the childcare offer has evolved over the years. Many sessional care providers, such as playgroups, exited the market when certain additional requirements in terms of planning and children's learning and development profiles came on board. So schools are actually really well placed to be able to offer some sessional care for younger children. So we have spoken to our school community, and there are two different processes that need to be followed. One process is for academies, and they're able to run their own consultation process to think about lowering their age range and make those recommendations. For statutory mainstream provision, it's a more formal process under the DfE guidance and requires us to hold formal consultations that we as a local authority run and then report back on. And obviously this report is coming to committee for your consideration and comment ahead of the report going to Cabinet in December. So the three schools in question are Colham Manor, Field End Infants and Minette Infant and Nursery School. They've all expressed a desire with their governing body's full support to lower their age range, which will allow them to offer 2-year-old places no later than next September 2025. So obviously they're in the first planning stages. So we've held a public consultation, we've received responses back. At the time of writing the report, we were still digesting the information. That's why the detail isn't in there. But I can allude to the outcome of the consultations if you so wish me to do so.
No, that's okay, because I guess the purpose of this item is for us to look at the proposals, not to actually make a decision on them. That would be the Cabinet who will be making that final decision. Any questions? Councillor Sweeting.
Well, obviously, I know the Cabinet will be making that decision, but this is a good way forward. It reminds me actually of what the council did very well in the 70s when we had a declining birth rate, and we used the class bases that were spare, if you like, inverted commas, to develop our nurseries. All that I would say, and I will just sort of remind everybody, that this was all very well until we had a huge birth rate increase in the 1988 birth year, where 350 extra youngsters were born that year, and it meant us scrambling around to put in extra capacity in the 90s. So that's all I would say. It's a good, very good in principle, but just be wary.
Okay, thank you. So we'll close that agenda item. So obviously we need to submit comments. So we're going to delegate comments to myself, Ryan, and to Councillor Sweeting. Thank you very much, Claire. You are free to go. Thank you. Right, so that moves us across to agenda item 8, which is the outcome of the proposal to consult on the closure of the specialist resource provision at Coatford Infant School. Councillor Sweeting.
Before we start, we've been receiving some information that the information that is included in this document. There are some
Councillor Sweeting, can we just let Abby present first, and then if you've got a question or comment, you can make it afterwards, because she will clarify. She'll be in a position to clarify anything that you might be raising, which is outside of this meeting. So let's give Abby a chance first, and then we can ask any relevant questions or comments, because she may actually cover it in her presentation. So I'd like Abby for you to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so you'll see there's a range of papers as part of this proposal. So what the local authority is proposing is to formally close the SRP at Coatford Infant School. The SRP is an SRP for physical disabilities and historically had 10 commissioned places. There's been declining demand for physical disability SRP places, and we've seen that through the request that came from the school to lower the number to 7. Currently there are 3 children attending, and as of next year there are due to be 2 remaining at the SRP. The SRP operates quite differently to a typical SRP. There is no separate specialist resource provision room or facilities per se in the school. The school operate currently as a very inclusive mainstream school, which we really support and think the school do a really, really good job of. The proposal is more of a technicality. What it means is there'll be no change for the children, because what they're doing now is in line with an inclusive mainstream school, and there'll be no change to the funding that the school receives for those children. This is more about correctly commissioning places according to need. Now, historically, children may have been more likely to be part of an SRP for physical disabilities. Nowadays, we do expect mainstream schools to be able to accommodate those needs. Many of our schools are DDA compliant and should be able to put the right support and provision in place to support those young people. So whilst the technical language we have to use is a closure, it actually means no change. It just means removing the reference to an SRP. But obviously following the DFE guidance, it's called a closure. Councillor Sweeting is correct in that there was an error made when we were gathering data through the data team in this report. We have created an addendum which was published online, and I believe councillors should have a copy of that. The error was specifically to do with referencing children on the SEND register versus children on SEND support. Ordinarily, we report on percentages of EHCPs and SEND support. We rarely report on SEND register combined, and I think that's where the confusion lay. So apologies for that error in the report, but the addendum has the correct information as a result. Just to say, as part of this process, there has been a thorough consultation process. You'll see through the papers there's quite a lot of feedback through the consultation. I think what we picked up from reading the feedback is there may be some confusion around what's being proposed. And I think there's quite a lot of fear and worry that what we're proposing will lead to some change. And actually what we're trying to say is it doesn't lead to any change. It's just having that as a mainstream inclusive school. So I'll hand over to Gary just to talk a little bit about the consultation process that's been taking place throughout this process.
Thank you. So it's been a formal statutory consultation process, so from 25th of September to 25th of October, an online consultation. Obviously, the number of responses is in the paper. And in addition to that, we also held a virtual event for families to attend. We had one attendee for that, and then we had a further face-to-face event at the school for almost 2.5 hours, again, sort of in October, in early October. Again, details of the responses are included in the consultation responses.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Smallwood.
Thank you, Chair. Abby, I just want to be really, really clear about just to go over a little bit of what you've said, that this is a technicality change rather than anything practical. So I kind of want, and I don't like doing this to an officer, but I am on this occasion because it's creating so much concern for parents and residents. An absolute cast iron guarantee that the service that the two young people with the physical additional needs will face no change in their experience at school whatsoever, and should somebody enter the school or that change at all, there will be nothing different to the experience they get. There's not a change in funding, there's not a decrease in any kind of service, that it will remain absolutely the same. And if we come back in a year's time, the feedback from residents we will be getting was, this was like, nothing has changed, the young people are still getting the same experience.
Thank you, Councillor. You are correct in that the funding is staying the same. The way it's funded is slightly different, i.e. through slightly different mechanisms as to how the school is funded, but equal amount. So we no longer commission the places for the SRP, which is the place funding of £6,000. However, we commit to paying exceptional funding to schools where they are over a certain percentage of children with EHCPs to replace their notional funding, and we replace with exactly the same £6,000. So Coatford Infant School currently has, as you can see according to the data, quite high levels of EHCPs. So we started that funding mechanism last year. We review it annually, but we are committed to make sure that those two children, whatever happens, should that not continue for any reason, we would pay for those two children £6,000. The only slight potential difference, which is something that needs to be agreed locally with the school, is around the therapy. So when we have therapy provided in our mainstream schools, it's done so through a centrally commissioned contract for CNWL. In SRPs, they tend to commission their own therapists. It's the same provision, it's the same therapy, it's delivered by this person or that person, but whilst we would ordinarily provide that therapy through our central CNWL contract, the school will be getting the same funding. So should they wish to continue with that therapy, they can do, but that's something to be agreed with the school. There's nothing in our proposal that would stop them from doing that. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you. Councillor Small,
Thank you. That is incredibly reassuring, and I hope it's delivered in the way that you've said. Reading between the lines and understanding quite personally the concerns that parents have written to me and to other councillors about, I think there is a wider concern about special needs provision within the school and within lots of schools, and that somehow, and I don't know how you connect the dots here, is that may have an impact on other types of special needs provision in the school. Can we have some reassurance that the local authority will support and facilitate anything extra that the school may have concerns around? I know there's loads of good practice around the delivery of special needs provision across the borough in lots of different settings, including a school where I'm a governor, just to give parents the absolute reassurance that there is good practice out there, but also some reassurance that actually, from what I understand, Copeford's teachers are already providing a really high level of provision on special needs education. Yes, they're stretched in lots of settings, but nothing should change, nothing should be different, and that we do a bit of a comms job in just reassuring them, even if that means us going to the school and continuing. I mean, look, the proof is always in the pudding, right? But I hope that is being recognised.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we all know there are national sort of pressures when it comes to SEND at the moment. There's been a lot of work going on in the borough to support schools, to support families and change our systems and processes. There's lots of really good work going on. What I'd say is there's some fantastic work going on in our schools around SEND. There are a whole range of challenging needs that schools are managing and supporting effectively, and some really, really good work going on to creatively support those needs. As far as Copeford's concerned, they are operating as an inclusive mainstream school. There will be no change to the children in the SRP or the children in the mainstream school. Currently, the children attending the SRP are in mainstream full-time, which is not the normal model. It's a really, really positive thing that the school operate that way. So in no way is it a criticism. However, an SRP is normally where children are attending a separate base for between 15 and 50% of their timetable. So the proposals that we are putting forward don't change anything for the school, the way they operate, the staff, the children in the SRP or outside. Everything will continue as is now, but we'll continue to support schools with SEND. And there's still lots of work that we're doing and that we'd like to do. I think a lot of really positive projects have been moved forward, and we're in a really good space and making a lot of progress overall. But we'll continue that work and continue to work with our schools, because it's very much a partnership effort with SEND. It's not a local authority matter, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Just wanted to add as well, from a kind of EHCP perspective, to reassure everyone, the EHCP is a plan which is a legal document, and we put the provision there, which is then adequately funded according to funding system. Therefore, we want to ensure that every plan is reflective of the students' needs. If the need change, if there is a need for different provision, we can work with the school at the point of annual review, which is a legal, again, right where parents can appeal as well to the content of it. So we want to make sure that everyone understands that it's very, very much just a technicality, as Abby mentioned, because the children always, regardless whether they are in a SRP for PD or any other, the plan is reflective of their needs. Therefore, we are accountable for providing the provision and working with school to deliver. Thank you.
Councillor Heena.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Small has taken my question, actually, and that's fine. It's good, because it's the same question that we're probably all asking. But just really how can we work more in reassuring the parents that there isn't a change? What can we do proactively to just really concrete that, and reassure the parents that, look, it's not going to be effective, because clearly that's where we've got the gap. And I just wondered how we can do that. Can we do anything else?
Thank you, Councillor. We'd certainly appreciate any support in helping to communicate that message. I think there's been a lot of fear that we've picked up on through this proposal, and I think a sort of fear that what we're proposing is not quite as it seems. This is not financially led. There are no savings for the council in any way, shape or form. Our role as commissioners is to ensure that we're commissioning effectively according to the data and the demand, and that's really what this is about, as well as ensuring that we are pushing forward a really inclusive agenda and that we don't want children with physical disabilities needing to attend an SLP in order to be with their peers and learn in a mainstream school. So I think anything that councillors can do to help reassure residents and parents would be really helpful, because there is no other alternative motivation behind this other than ensuring that we're being inclusive and commissioning appropriately.
Thank you. Councillor Sweeting.
Thank you, Chair. We still have some concerns about the accuracy of the report, and I will pass to my colleague, Councillor Punjab, to explain where we think there's some problems.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate that there is this continuous narrative which says nothing's going to change, but throughout this report it talks about change. So that, for me, feels that is a bit disingenuous to say nothing's going to change. As a parent of children who used to attend Coatford and am very much involved in the Mums Network group and know the teachers very, very well and the work that Coatford does in terms of mainstreaming, and actually it's probably the school that does it really, really well in Hillingdon. I would like to kind of bring your attention to some of the things that I have been fed. On page 52, it says the school approached the council. Well, the school did not approach the council. The school, it was a conversation around the pan reduction, and the
Councillor Punja, do you actually have a question here? Because I said at the start I don't want any narratives. I just want to get straight to the question.
So you don't want to hear the inaccuracies?
Just your microphone's giving feedback. It's not about not hearing the inaccuracies, but if you have a question, can you please ask the officers the question rather than giving the narrative around it?
Well, there's quite a lot.
So
Mr. Chair, there is quite a lot in here. So, I mean, are we going to go through them bit by bit?
No, because we're not going to be. Just whatever your question is, you can ask the question to the officers.
So will the SRP funding be added to the EHCP so that the children are not impacted?
Thank you. So, as I explained, I think you're referencing the place funding of £6,000. Is that correct? So they have the place funding and then they have their top-up funding. So their top-up funding will continue as is. The £6,000 place funding will not be paid as place funding. It will be paid as exceptional funding, which the council provides as a non-statutory funding stream to support schools that are highly inclusive. So the £6,000 that isn't paid through the place funding will be provided through the exceptional funding.
But that is change, and therefore, according to the Equalities Act, this report did not do an equality impact assessment. And according to this, when there is any change, that basically the equality impact assessment must be implemented before changes are made affecting disabled children. So can you explain why there wasn't an equality impact assessment?
So my understanding was that the equality impact assessment assessed that there was no change, because for the children and for the school they're receiving the same money, the same provision, and there is no change. Whether the funding is provided through place funding or exceptional funding, the £6,000 is being paid for those children as it is now. So there is no change to what's being offered currently.
Mr. Little.
Thank you. I don't have the advantage of colleagues of detailed knowledge of this, but what seems to be a very simple, straightforward proposition has aroused quite a lot of opposition, which you're telling us is baseless. Do you think there are lessons to be learned here in the way that this is communicated? Because the impression they've got is obviously very different from the impression you want to convey.
Thank you. It's an interesting question. I mean, we're certainly open to any feedback as a result of this process. I'm sure there's things that we could have done better. I think from a council perspective, we didn't necessarily expect that parents would feel as upset as they have felt because there hasn't been any change through the proposal as to what we're putting forward. So I think for us, it's caused a lot of fear and anxiety that we certainly didn't intend to cause. But we also expected for this to be a lot more straightforward, as you said, because there is no change in what's being offered or provided. So we'd certainly take any feedback. If there's anything we can improve on, we will certainly try to learn from that. However, it is a challenge because we have to follow a statutory process. And I think part of the challenge is the terminology in the process can sound quite alarming when we're talking about closing and closures, which technically on paper it is as part of the process. However, we're not closing any actual provision room, delivery of any support, etc. So, as I said, we're very open to any feedback and we'll gladly learn any lessons that we can.
If I may be allowed a supplementary, what role has the school itself played in this communication?
Which communication do you refer to specifically?
This whole process.
Okay, so we've been engaging with the school for some time. This has been part of a much wider review. Again, on page 53, you might note we've actually increased the SRP provision across the borough. So there's 72 extra places that have gone into schools to support children with SEND. And part of that review obviously highlighted the inclusivity for children with physical disabilities. So I've been discussing with the school for some time. We've talked about alternative provision being offered from the school if they have the space and capacity to offer a different type of provision from the school. And again, we've been communicating with them what our thoughts are. We've talked about the evidence and the inclusivity. So there's been quite a lot of engagement with the school over a number of months pre-consultation.
Yeah, that's not quite what I was asking, because the people who are best placed to get the right idea over would seem to be the school. And if they've obviously, between you, you've not done the reassurance that you think you ought to have done.
From a local authority perspective, we have tried to offer reassurance to the school. So there's been lots of direct dialogue with the school. The consultation we held was with the school staff and parents and other representatives. So we have tried to offer reassurance. We have tried to confirm there has been no change, or will be no change due to the proposals. Again, as Abby mentioned earlier, if there's things we can learn, then absolutely we're happy to learn. We can all learn something from these events, but we have tried to give reassurance all the way through this process.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sweeting.
Thank you, Chair. Was the decision to close made before the consultation started? This issue has definitely gone to parents and the school that say that the authority had decided before starting the consultation.
Thank you, Councillor. It certainly hadn't been decided. We have a statutory process to follow. What I can say is that conversations started almost a year ago with the school. So there's been a lot of dialogue looking at the position, the data, and ways that we could support the school. We looked at different options around alternative SRP designations, but no decision has been made because obviously we have to follow a statutory process.
Thank you. Supplementary.
This issue is the subject of very large petitions and the concerns of our residents, as well as the teachers of the school. We have this report going to the Cabinet. Would it not be possible, because of the concerns, that this goes to the full Council on the 28th of November so that it could be discussed by all members at that meeting, and then that decision could go to Cabinet? Would it be possible to do it that way round, please?
No, I don't think that's the. I mean, I'd have to speak to them services about it, but I don't think that's the appropriate way to do it. Councillor Punja, you got a question?
Yes, I have. In relation to the inaccuracies that are in this report that have been brought to our attention, we would like to know that if there is no change, then why were parents told? Yes, it might be technical languages that are changed, but why then are parents not told that they can access this extra provision if it's in the EHCP, when rather than being told that that provision is taken away from the school? And also, why is it, and that was done in January this year, so that's before the consultation started, and why also, in clarity with the school and with the teachers, has it not been explained of the funding mechanisms, because they really do understand the funding mechanisms. And they really seem to, there's a disparity here between what you're saying and what the council is saying, and what the school and the teachers are actually living. And if it's all going through the EHCP, and this is where it's going to be led through EHCP, our EHCPs, what I understand from SEN officers in the school.
Shall we give Abby a chance to answer the question?
It kind of leads in, so she'll be able to answer the whole.
That's fine. Well, let's give Abby a chance now. Thank you.
Thank you. So just to be clear, as far as the difference between a child who is considered attending the SLP versus a child who is attending mainstream within the HCP, there is no difference in the delivery of provision of what's offered with one and the other. The only difference currently is the provider of the therapy. So there is no difference in what that package the child receives other than who delivers the therapy. So that's the key thing to remember. There are no children who are missing out on anything, who are being denied anything. And as far as the delivery of provision in an EHCP, that's not specified as to who it needs to be as to who delivers it. It's about the therapy being delivered in order to improve outcomes. As far as funding, we have explained numerous times to the school and through various other responses as to the funding mechanism. The exceptional funding was brought in last year. As I said, it is a non-statutory funding stream that we do to support our schools that are highly inclusive, so they are not financially disadvantaged by being so inclusive. So that was in place a year ago. The school was a benefactor of that funding at that stage, and we have explained that place funding is replaced with this exceptional funding, because currently the exceptional funding does not include FLP children because they are funded through this different mechanism. So with the FLP, if it does move forward with formally closing, then those FLP children will be included in the exceptional funding and will benefit from that additional funding, so making it exactly the same as what was in place before. So we have explained that many times. I'm not sure where the confusion is coming from. We are very keen to ensure that parents and the school are clear. We're not trying to do anything different to what we've proposed, what we've shared through various forums. There is no financial saving that we're looking to make through it, and there is no change to how the support is delivered per se, apart from potentially the delivery of the therapy, which is for discussion. So I apologise if there are residents who are not clear on that proposal, but I can say we have gone above and beyond to try and make that as clear as possible.
Okay, great. Thank you, Abby. I would like to bring this agenda item to a close. So we need to, again, submit comments to Cabinet on the proposals. So we will do that, again, Ryan, myself and Councillor Sweeting. Is there something you'd like to say, Councillor Sweeting?
I think there are some concerns here, so I don't know whether the comments that will come from the whole committee will be in line with the comments that we would like to provide.
So normally, Councillor Sweeting, as you normally send me your comments, and usually we're in agreement, aren't we, with our comments? So we'll do the same as we normally do. We'll take it offline and we'll agree the comments and they will be submitted. Thank you. Let's move to agenda item 9. Oh, sorry.
Can I just make a point of just about good order of our meetings in future? And I recognise colleagues opposite are passionate about this. But if in future we've got massive problems with reports, and I mean like inaccuracies in reports, like not scrutiny, but actual inaccuracies where we think the reports are wrong. I think it would be really useful if we did that before the meeting and shared it, even when we're subbing, and if the Labour group lead, and I think it's for you and the Labour group lead to do that if that's possible, because I think it would have been interesting to hear those things, but actually they probably should have come in advance of the meeting. It wasn't like we got this report yesterday. We got some of them corrected, which one of the parents very helpfully sent in to us, and I just wondered in future that would be a good practice, and then we can properly scrutinise things, and that's not just for this, that's for anything, possibly on any select committee, on any point of the council.
Thank you, Councillor Smallwood. Yes, interesting comments and noted. Yes, thank you for that. Right, so let's move to agenda item 9, which is the outcome of the proposal to consult to extend the age range for the assessment base at Ryslip Gardens Primary School. So, Abby?
Thank you. So, following on from our discussions around resource provisions that we have in place for children with SEND, as many of you know, we introduced assessment base recently for Ryslip Gardens, which is a new type of provision for us to try and enable us to help identify needs early and support through that assessment process. And we're really positive about that provision, and it's moving forward really nicely. So this proposal is to make a slight tweak to the age range. It currently covers 3 to 5 years old. We are looking to extend that to 2 years to 5 years, mainly in exceptional circumstances rather than as a general order. The reasons, for example, where this may be the case, where it's appropriate, is if we have a 2-year-old who's approaching their 3rd birthday, and it would be a benefit for them to be part of the assessment base. So I think all the key information is in the report. Would you like to say a few words? I'll hand over to Gary.
So again, same as the last time, statutory consultation period over the same time scale, so 25th of September, 25th of October. We only got 12 responses for this particular consultation when this one went out. But again, as Abby said, it's really just to make sure that we can support as many children as possible.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sweeting?
I think, again, this is good in principle. I think that to use our unfilled places in this way is a good look. All I would say is, did we meet the requirements of Building Bulletin 104 when we were designing this? And did it come out, because I haven't visited it would be very good for us to be able to visit, but and did it mean that the class bases that were extended the school's PAM have actually been used for this? Because it seems that we've spent money on that and having to spend money on this, so there's 2 lots of funding. So did we use Building Bulletin 104?
Yes, Councillor Sweeting, yes, we follow BB 104. Obviously, it was designed for this assessment base, so that's all in place and according to regulations.
Great, okay, thank you very much. So on this agenda item, we are again submitting comments to the Cabinet on the proposals. So again, we will take that offline. Okay, thank you. Right, so agenda item 10 then, draft education strategy 24 to 29. So Michael, please.
The report sets out to the committee draft education strategy for the next 5 years, including the rationale for the priorities and the range of sort of informal and slightly more formal consultation steps we've taken with our school communities and education providers to get to this point. And so, as you can see, it sets out the 3 main priorities, and the 3rd priority is a combination of priorities which have been either started pre-pandemic, and we can see that they still exist post-pandemic. The data tells us those are our big priorities. It brings together elements of the sort of broader education work across the council, including attendance and exclusions. And yeah, so that for your comments or for you to note those priorities.
Thank you very much. Questions, Councillor Punja.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to kind of understand what the key differences were between this strategy and the previous one, please.
Well, that's a good question, I suppose. I mean, there are some elements of this strategy which are the same. So priority number 1 reflects the fact that our head teachers have identified that there's been much less collaborative working between schools and settings, and that COVID pandemic disrupted that even more. And we haven't quite got back to a place where our schools are using the strengths of each other to do that. So I think that's one of those things you find in every education strategy, whichever one you look at across the country. But it's actually pertinent to Hillingdon because that's been identified by our school leaders. And actually, I think, you know, the sort of strapline of Stronger Together is we actually have a lot of strengths in Hillingdon. We have a lot of schools and settings, and we need to be able to share that practice to identify some of the area-wide situations and challenges that we've got. So I don't really worry so much about the fact there's a repetition of some of the priorities. In terms of, let's say, priority number 3, that's what the data tells us. The Select Committee commented on some of those things in the standards report for last year. They are still things that existed pre-pandemic. It makes it absolutely appropriate we take a reflective step backwards as an education community and say, let's have a look at this. Are we doing everything we can do? A key focus of this is working with our partners, so not only Brunel University but the Education Endowment Foundation, who are already working with us. So looking at the evidence base, and of course that vital thing about sharing practice, sharing ideas. And so there'll always be some element of repetition. I mean, I could say you could probably go across the whole of London, you'll see some of these priorities reflected. These are national issues in some cases: attendance, persistent absence, disadvantage gap widening. But that doesn't mean that we as a local area shouldn't look at it closely and see what we can do more of. And if you've looked at the data in the appendices, for example, you'll notice that many of our groups do really well. Many of our groups are doing better than expected. And then there's a number of key groups. Of course, disadvantage is just under 25% of our cohort, and it's absolutely right that we look at that, but as a model to help schools to meet their own school improvement priorities rather than do something different to what they're trying to achieve already. If that answers the question.
Great, thank you. Mr. Little.
Thank you. I have 2 questions, if you'll permit, Chair. One relates to priority 2 and one to priority 3. In relation to priority 2, there is mention on page 117 about young people wanting to understand more about their role as, among other things, future voters. But in the specific achieving this priority, there's no mention about citizenship and education for citizenship. Would it be helpful if you could include something on that?
Thank you for the comment. I'm sure we could. Of course, schools already deliver things around citizenship. It's just interesting to note that feedback from young people that we've been consulting on in conjunction with our colleagues that were here earlier. That's what young people identified, amongst other things, including financial awareness. So again, if you ask schools, particularly secondaries, they say we do that. I was in an infant school the other day where they'd use the polling booths to run their own mock elections. So it's really about, you're absolutely right, and we can actually put those words in it. What we haven't yet created is a preparation for adulthood policy for Hillingdon, which many areas of the country have already done. So the idea of the principle is the first step is actually to create that and make it explicit within the provision. But I'm more than happy to take your comment and to make an amendment if that's pleases the committee.
Well, I would certainly welcome that, particularly the broader strategy. But in relation to priority 2, on the top of page 102, you talk about addressing emotionally based school non-attendance.
Yeah.
Is there not a wider non-attendance with children with special needs? So that should it be framed more broadly rather than just emotionally based?
There's a national attendance issue, which everybody's aware of, which is why we've called it Improving Inclusion by Improving Attendance. There are a multitude of reasons why there may be those attendance issues. What we're trying to do is to present to our school community that we have an area-wide problem, and actually it's incumbent upon us to dig deeper to find out the causes. So rather than sort of spelling it all out to them, actually we need to work together with them, back to priority one, to think about what are we doing to tackle the wider attendance issues, because they're a broad piece. However, there is specific and emerging data from all of our mental health providers that there are large groups of our young people, mainly in secondary education, starting about year 8 and year 9, who stop leaving their bedrooms, refuse to attend school, cite severe anxiety and related things, suicidal ideation, sadly sometimes following through on that. And again, this is a growing issue that's been seen across the country, so that's why that's been put in there as a quite particular aspect. And as an area, it's about what do we do about it together to sort of address it. It may be something that, hopefully it improves over time, but at the moment it's a hot topic on everybody's lips, and that's why it's reflected there, I think.
Thank you. As Michael said, I think particularly post-COVID, this has become a real focal area, and something that we're keen to have explicit within the strategy, because it is something, as Michael's referenced, that we're seeing a lot of growth in, and something we really need to get to grips with. So I think whilst we need to look at the broader attendance as well, that particular group of the EBSNA is really important for us to recognise as an area and be able to kind of come together to look at ways that we can support that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sweeting.
Well, as with pretty well all education reports, it's well written and well detailed, so well done on that. I know there's been much work done between officers and the schools, because I've had this through my governing body meetings. However, we do have major challenges in raising standards and narrowing the gaps. So what progress have we made since the last strategy that we can actually define, so that, and do we know, are we certain that this one will make a difference? If we haven't made too much progress from last time, is this one actually going to make a difference?
Thank you. That's a good question, I think, to consider. I'm not sure I can give you a good definitive answer on that. I think we're probably in line with the national picture, which is we haven't cracked this issue. Do we know what works? Absolutely. You can look at the EF website if you want as one place. How many of our schools actually fully engage with the Education Endowment Foundation materials? 4 out of 99. So we've commissioned the EF to work with us. They approached us as well. Brunel University are also going to be working with us in their education department. So we're trying to bring together, both some of our key partners internally, the college is involved in it as well. And we just have to continue on. I think, sadly, we keep mentioning the P word, but the pandemic probably disrupted and exacerbated some of the conditions, and those of us that are teachers know that schools worked really hard just to keep things going for a long period. So as much as anything, I think, Councillor Sweeting, it's just an opportunity to say, okay, let's take a step back and a deep breath. Let's shine a torch on what the issues are telling us today, and let's look at them with fresh eyes, building on what we're doing well. So I don't want that to sort of sound like, sort of bland rhetoric, but I think it's an area I've worked on for a long time, sort of nationally, and I know that it can make a big difference. So we can just look at ourselves and we can work together collaboratively. There's lots of schools in Hillingdon that have fantastic results for their disadvantaged students, and I think as well, it's not just, so it's building on those strengths. 2 of the schools are actually talking at our launch event in Brunel University next week. But, we want to get all the schools to present how they're tackling that are doing well, so that we can all learn from it. But I think it's also about raising the standards for every child. So when you look at things like careers advice and guidance, we think about those at risk of NEET as like right on the fringes. But if we improve the quality of that, that benefits every student that's not sure what they're going to do when they're 15 years old. So I think it's the disadvantage is the vehicle by which we can raise standards even more broadly. Of course, if we look across London, I think we're 31 out of 32 boroughs currently in terms of that gap, and it's right that we look at it and think, what didn't we do right last time?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add, Councillor Sweeting, that I believe that the difference as well from the previous one and this one is that it's very much co-produced with young people, with stakeholders. We have evidence of that, and we want to make sure that we are accountable for what we implement, and I think Michael's teams are very keen to show that. And I hope that this comes. The other aspect that is different is as well that we do it across the services. We are one, education and SEND. SEND is extra layer that covers that strategy. We have, of course, our SEND and AP strategy, as you know. However, when we're looking at career advice, when we look at PFH, preparation for adulthood agenda, it's kind of all together, and I think that's the big difference. Thank you.
I think I've seen that with the comments that have come from my governing body. I know that there's been a lot of work, so thank you and thank the officers. I think the issue that I'd like to sort of find out whether there's any progress, we need to look at our Key Stage 4 and Key Stage 5 results, and so it's the partnership with our secondaries that is so important, because we do want to be on par with outer London boroughs and better than our statistical neighbours. So what progress has been made on this liaison with our secondaries on these issues?
Well, if you'd asked me that question a year ago, I might have given you a slightly different answer, but we've got more than 60 schools signed up for our launch event next week. We invited 20 schools, including primaries and early years providers, to be part of the strategic partnership board for the EEF partnership model, and 19 out of the 20 joined, and so we've got good representation from early years to post 16. We have 12 secondary schools signed up next week. One trust has 4 secondary schools in it and often don't, but we actually have good engagement with them now, and I wrote to them this week, today actually, and they're already part of the partnership board. My point is that actually this is a priority for most of our schools. Some of them have come back to me and said capacity issues and staffing issues mean it's a struggle, and that's always the big risk currently. It's a really big risk, and so we have to make sure we bring it together. So I think engagement is improving, but what they undoubtedly want to see when they talk to me privately, the head teachers, is they want to be involved in things that are actually meeting their agendas, and they want to listen to their peers. So that back to priority one, we need to make sure that they're collaborating with each other about real things that meet, align with their priorities. Quite a number of them have attendance as one of their top priorities. So it's to speak their language, and it's our job to make sure we just keep it sharp focus and keep listening to them. So the partnership board will sort of decide which directions we take. That's also why it's a 5-year programme. It doesn't mean that we won't achieve some objectives before that, but other things may come along. But you need to give these things time.
Thank you. Councillor Smallwood.
Thank you, Chair. My first question is around the barriers to collaboration. What do we think the barriers are? I mean, we read in the report that there's possibly less collaboration. What do you think the barriers are? I mean, I would hazard a guess maybe in the primary setting is some of the competitiveness for classroom places. We've got less of that problem in our secondary setting, but I'm just interested what you think the barriers are to schools collaborating and sharing good practice and ideas.
I think that historic situations were a problem when I first started. A lot of schools have said the stability they've got from working with the same people means they're more inclined to engage, so that's a reverse to what you're saying. I mentioned staffing. That's a big risk. It's a really big risk because a lot of schools are really struggling to get a full complement of staff, and that affects things. So the smaller primary schools, for example, you know, even to let somebody out for the day to something that they know is important is actually difficult for them. So we've got to be creative, and we have a very mixed playing field in education with our different types of providers, and sometimes there's an element of competition. And the competition at sort of the top end of education sometimes can be a barrier, although a lot of the secondary schools have a pattern of working with each other in smaller clusters. So in the north of the borough, those schools work very closely together. They even support each other with providing staffing to fill specialist posts like A-level maths teachers. I can think of and so it does exist. We just want to make it a bigger piece. And then, of course, I'd say for Hillingdon, there's a perception about the north and the south. And there is a distinction, we know that, and we need to be aware of that. But we also need to still continue to share our practice. However, somebody mentioned the Safer Hayes initiative. We've got 15 schools signed up in the Greater Hayes area, primary and secondary. Our youth leaders are going into those schools starting tomorrow at Barn Hill School. They're talking about safety. It's being facilitated by young people themselves alongside our colleagues. And the intention is, I mean, actually 15 schools coming together around a common project, it provides an opportunity to talk about lots of other things. So I think we've got lots of green shoots, long beyond green shoots, to be blunt. I don't want to turn it on its head, but I'm just saying I think we've seen progress. We've just got to keep on going.
Thank you, Chair. My next question is around something that I think is mentioned in the strategy, but I think is missing maybe from a priority, and that's around vocational education. I think since the late 90s, we've seen rightly or wrongly, and this isn't a party political point, but I think both sets of parties have done it not very well, is there was this obsession with university through sort of like the 90s and the early 2000s, and then it was all a bit up in the air in the early days of the coalition, and then there was sort of moves towards things with T-levels with the last government that started to try and move in that direction. But it mentions that there's a lack of vocational provision in Hillingdon, but it's not down as one of the priorities, and I just wondered why.
Depends where you want to shine the torch. So if you want to shine the torch post-16, we have a narrow academic-focused curriculum. One of the reasons for EBSNA for some of those students is they can't see a curriculum that they want. One of our schools, Oakwood School, has actually launched a programme for its students with EBSNA. It's got about 4 or 5, which includes a vocational offer to get them into school alongside English and maths. And so, again, that idea, we've got a problem, let's look at solutions. Let's go back to some of the things that we know work. Let's maybe consider broadening the curriculum. We're waiting as well to see what some of those national steers will be. When I look at post-16 education, I can categorically tell you we've got an incredibly strong offer across Hillingdon, whether it's at both apprenticeships, the range of offers and things like that. I think for schools there's a real challenge because only doing A-levels, of course A-levels are still a very core part of what people want to do, but more and more young people entering their GCSE year, more and more young people leaving year 13, they don't want to do the sort of traditional courses. They're choosing not to go to university, but also we've seen a trend where some of our most able young people in year 11 don't want to stay on at school because they can get the courses they want to do with the technology that goes with it in other places. The good thing is we have a very broad offer. I think we're very lucky in that respect. So one of our roles is to ensure that every young person sees what's there for them in that sort of vital period. So I think that's really important. I think we should be very proud of what's been done over the last few years to make that very transparent. It really helps when you've got key players like the college, and of course the college has expanded, reaches out to MIT, for example, so you can go and look at the sign for West London Institute of Technology at Uxbridge College, and I think all of those things are really important for young people in moving into adulthood. So I'm not worried about the post-16 offer. What I want to make sure is that every young person knows about it and can make a conscious choice. And in order to do that, they also need some passports, and those are things like literacy and numeracy at level 2 and above, amongst other things.
Just to add, Councillor Small, that we, within the PFA, because you asked why it's not a priority, the priority PFA covers that. So one of the priorities is being part of the community, but it's also education and employment. So it is covered, just to clarify. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hager.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Going on to page 122 and 123, particularly in what we're doing, improving inclusion by improving attendance, which we know is right at the beginning. And I just wondered, I really liked what we've got on point 5, is how will we achieve this priority? That's on page 122, and obviously you've got your list of 8 topics there, which are amazing. I just wondered whether these have been worked with, where we're going to work with the parents and the children, the families as well, around that, especially on point 5, creating a protocol for the early identification of possible emotional-based school non-attendance. So I just wondered whether we're going to ask the families, the children, the adults, what would help them for us to diagnose that earlier. I mean, obviously we've got healthcare professionals that understand that, and we've got CAMS, but is there any way that we can, include our children? Is there warning signs that can be included in here? I don't know, maybe getting up late, maybe going to bed later, sort of little shows that might be a thread that's running through that we can pick up in this.
Thank you for the question. We're lucky because some boroughs in England have done a huge amount of work on this. And in about 30 seconds, I can download everything they've done that supports parents, toolkits, protocols. So at the moment, we're in the process of working with our lead educational psychologist who does training on this to decide which of those we will take, because a lot of the advice guidance for schools, for parents, and the protocols are already present in 2 or 3 key areas. And so I think it's right we piggyback off some of the work that's already been done. And it's also right that we ask young people and their parents. So in terms of mental health support, it's not all the same. And some of our providers will turn up at a house and talk to a child through their bedroom door. And I think we need variety, and we need to recognise the underlying concerns. So we're working with our health partners to think about whether the way to tackle this, drop-ins and appointments aren't necessarily going to be attended. These are the children most likely to end up as needs because of this, because that was what we discovered even a few years ago without really having a name for it. So consultation has to be at the heart of it, and that's why we're working closely with our colleagues who are working with young people, because their views need to be central to this, as well as their parents.
Councillor Punja.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I just wanted to say thank you for the difference point and saying that this was collaborative, because I think being collaborative is actually a way to achieve what you want out of the strategy rather than being enforced. So I think that's a really great approach to the strategy. I just wanted to kind of ask and bringing ourselves back into SEND on page 9 of the strategy, where the strategy states that school leaders are asking for more clarity and support on supporting children with SEND and those in educational healthcare plans. Some schools are dealing with high numbers of SEND and have a higher mobility and want more equitable share of the children with particular needs. What is the council doing to ensure that this burden is shared more equally, please?
There we go. Yes, lovely. Thank you. That's a really good question and a really relevant question at the moment. So many of our schools are working really hard with such a broad range of SEN needs in schools. And it's so different from even a few years ago. It's changed so much. So we've really tried to look at what our schools need, what our families need in order to be successful in their school placement. So we've looked at the services we deliver through our SEND advisory service. We're looking at creating a small multidisciplinary team to support with some of the more complex cases, because it can be very hard for schools who really want to support these young people and help them be successful, but have needs that feel too much for them to be able to sort of support with. So we're looking at all of our services across the board to try and provide that support and guidance. And I think it's very much about sharing good practice, because, no 2 children with SEND, no 2 children are the same, but certainly no 2 children with SEND and more complex needs are the same. And there's some really varied practices out there that are really positive and having a huge impact on outcomes. So I think it's key to sort of share those. But we're very, very aware of the pressures that schools face and the good work that they do with children with SEND. And we continue to work with them, listen to them, understand the challenges that they're facing and shape our services to support them.
Can I just wanted to add that through that we also realised that it's important for schools to have a training offer that they require, and that's also part of our ongoing development and also our strategy and improvement plan, as you know. And the other part is to share that good practice that Abby mentioned, is to give them opportunity. We do it through various streams, but including Senko Forum. And there is lots of kind of situations that, for instance, a few years ago we didn't have, where they can come and meet the SEND team, share the practice, and then we can share the expertise on the LEAP and through various streams through comms to schools. So we really want to show their good practice and kind of build on the best. Thank you.
And in cases where schools are unable to take children because of their complex needs, what work is then done? Because I'd be fearful of children falling through the gap in that sense as well. So what work is then done with the schools through this kind of where does it address it in this strategy of the kind of work that will then be done with the schools? And I appreciate your point of good practice and training, but I'm really concerned that the school leaders are going, well, we've got enough going on, we don't want to take this extra thing on. So, you know, how does this strategy deal with that?
Thank you. So in response to that, I'd say this strategy doesn't specifically respond to that, but the SEND and AP strategy does. So that's where it's really captured. We've got one of our ambitions, which is about fully inclusive education. Now, we're keen to ensure that our schools are managing the needs of the children in their area, and some of that involves some change and some shift in what used to happen. Obviously, there are children that need more specialist input through special schools, but we want to work towards a system whereby our schools are shaped around the needs of the children in the local area, rather than having an approach of, this is what we can do, we can't meet those needs. So it's very much sort of working with schools to move that system forward, understand what support schools need in order to be able to do that. I think one of the things that we've been doing to ensure that we're being really transparent with schools is we're sharing the census data of EHCPs with our schools. So we do that termly, and I think that's really important to understand the demographics of the area, the challenges where there's more pressure in some schools versus others who have less pressure, and how we can kind of work together to address those needs. So one of the things we're looking at is cluster groups around SEND. So we bring together our primary and secondary schools, looking at the needs of the area and what they need to do to shape their provision to meet those needs, etc. But I have to also stress it's really challenging for schools, and I don't want to underestimate that. As an ex-head teacher myself, from even a few years ago when I was in schools, the needs that we're seeing in mainstream school now have moved on even more, and it's an ever-evolving system, so we do need to understand that and the challenges schools have and really work to support them.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. I'd like to bring this agenda item to a close, so thank you very much. I think we need to, again on this one, submit comments to Cabinet. There's quite a few, so we will do that, but thank you all for joining this evening. I think we're going on to item 11. I didn't know if anyone wanted to stay back for that necessarily. No, not really. Not really. We're just going to have a quick summary overview. So not. But thank you all so much for joining this evening, and a safe journey home to you guys. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so agenda item 11 then, which is our review, persistent absenteeism. Obviously, we are at a stage now where we have completed all of our witness sessions. We've had quite a few. So I am very grateful for everyone who has contributed and participated and been very candid in sharing their thoughts and opinions, especially our young people. I can't stress that enough, because the voice of the child is very, very important. I'm a strong advocate for that, so it's great to hear from them. So what I would suggest that we do is, for this agenda item, we kind of just make a request to all committee members that we take some time to read through our or the many notes that we've got from our witness session, and perhaps come back formulating some kind of recommendations in our minds, and perhaps we come back in the new year and share some ideas to take forward to Cabinet. Is that agreed? Yeah, brilliant. Okay, thank you so much. So then we move on to agenda item... Oh, sorry, Mr Little.
Before you move on, I think we ought to give special thanks to Ryan, both for the organisational skills of putting these sessions together and for the extensive notes he's taken that have captured what has been quite a process, I think, much more than we've normally had when we're doing these reports. So I think he does deserve the credit.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that to everyone's attention. Yeah, that's right, Ryan. You've worked really, really hard on this, so we really appreciate all your hard work and effort, and all the many pens that you've been through in the paper as well. So, sorry, Councillor Smallwood.
Chair, thank you. I just wondered if it would be possible. It's always very nice to recognise when people have done, and right to the adults if we want to, but I think it would be quite nice whether yourself or, I don't want to put the Cabinet member in a position without having asked her, but I'm sure she wouldn't mind the Cabinet member for Children's Services and Education to write to the young people, maybe with just a little synopsis of what we decided or what we were doing with them, just to say well done and thank you, letter-headed paper. It's something that they could keep. I thought it would be very nice. I don't mind who it comes from. It can come from both of you. Come from me. I don't mind. It just would be a nice thing for them to have.
Yeah, thank you so much. That is a nice idea, and I think that we'll bring that to. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so let's move on to agenda item. Where are we? 12. Wow. Forward plan. So obviously many items that we discussed this evening are coming to Cabinet next month. So just to be mindful of that. Any questions, comments, anything anyone wants to share on that one? No? Right. So thank you very much. Let's move on to 13, which is the work programme. Councillor Sweeting.
Well, it's nice to know that we're not going to get a budget report. I don't think it's there, is it? I did have to look a couple of times. So obviously no savings. And if it's going to the February meeting, does this mean that the consultation, which ended at the end of January on the budget, we weren't included? Our comments to the great British public out there fell on deaf ears because they couldn't take up any points that we were raising.
Okay, what we'll do is I will ask Ryan to check and he will let us know. Any other questions or comments? No? Yes. Oh, Councillor Sweeting. I think it would be good to have the youth offer update in our work programme, because there are still, as we've seen today, lots of good work, but lots of things that are still embryonic. Also, because our budget is going to be very much sort of focused, I think, on the safety valve, maybe we could have an update on the safety valve in January. If we're going to have our budget report in February, that will give us a much better sort of understanding of the issues around, the deficit. Okay, again, we can take this offline, get Ryan to have a look at the work programme and when we're getting the budget, and we'll take it from there. Okay, any other? No. Okay, so that brings the whole meeting to a close. We made it. Thank you, everyone. So the next meeting is on the 7th of January. So therefore, when it does arrive, I wish you all a very restful, peaceful, festive break. We've still got a bit of time to go, but stay safe, everybody. All right, thank you very much. Have a safe journey home.